Morning, everyone. It's March 18th, and here is your lesson for today. Hope you're doing well. This is Miss Heineman, and I miss you guys, so hope you're doing good. And here we go, a little bit of math today. So here we are. We have our second e-learning day. Nice job yesterday with the review. Congruent triangle shortcuts. So our big learning target that's new for us today is right here. Congruent triangle shortcuts. I can apply the criteria for triangle congruence using side, 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 angle, 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 side, and RHL postulates. The next one being congruent figures. That's just a review from yesterday, so maybe doing a little bit of practice with that. And so that being said, I'll invite you to pause the video at different points. And so at this point, if you take out your yellow pages, that would be awesome. I'm going to take out mine. Right here, I wrote it already. And you can definitely pause here. At this point, you should have this top part here with congruent figures. And some of my writing has disappeared here, so I'm gonna add that in right there. So you should have the definition of congruent figures, and question number 1 on your homework yesterday was, tell me what's true about congruent figures. And so all pairs of corresponding sides are congruent and all pairs of corresponding angles are congruent. It would have been the correct answer. All right, so today we're gonna look at the 5 shortcuts to prove triangles congruent. Now this looks kind of crazy, but of course you can pause the video at this point. And then once you unpause the video and resume, I will just read through each of them, and hopefully just hearing that and seeing what's written is helpful to you. Okay, but we're going to look at these 5 shortcuts because proving figures congruent can be really annoying, because if you go by the original definition where you show all sets of corresponding sides congruent and all sets of corresponding angles congruent, that's a lot of things to show congruent. And if the triangle is the smallest polygon we're going to look at, that means we have to show all 3 sets of corresponding sides and all 3 sets of corresponding angles, which is 6 sets of things, or 6 matches. Whereas if we look at these shortcuts to prove triangles congruent, we only have to show 3 matches that are true. And that's a lot less work. So, work smarter, not harder, all right? And so I would invite you at this point to pause the video, and I'm actually going to, that's a much better screen to look at. So at this point, pause the video and write all 5 of these things down. I'll give you a moment to do that, and then I will start reading through them. All right, so here are the 5. Now I'm assuming that you've written everything down, so I'm going to zoom in at this point. So side, side, side postulate. If you can prove all 3 pairs of corresponding sides for the 2 triangles are congruent, then you can say the triangles are congruent. So triangle HOM is congruent to triangle SEM by side, side, side is how you would write it. The side angle side postulate. If 2 pairs of corresponding sides and the corresponding angle between them are congruent, then the triangles are congruent. Right? So notice 2 sets of sides and the angle between them. Sometimes instead of saying between them, we'll say included angle. That means the same thing. And if you notice what I highlighted right here, note angle 1 and angle 2 in this picture are always vertical angles, which means they are always congruent to each other. So that's something I don't need to tell you when you look at a picture. You just have to know that when you see the vertical angles, you can mark them congruent, okay? Old stuff from back in the day when we were younger. Angle side angle. If 2 pairs of corresponding angles and the corresponding side between them are congruent, then the triangles are congruent. So triangle ASH is congruent to triangle LEY by angle side angle, because we have 2 sets of angles congruent and the side in between them, or the included side. Angle angle side postulate. If 2 pairs of corresponding angles and the corresponding side not between them are congruent, then the triangles are congruent. So if you have these 2 angles, just like angle side angle, but the side is outside of those 2 angles, we can say that the triangles are congruent. So triangle JAV is congruent to triangle UNT. T. And then the last one, just like the other 4, has 3 matches, but most other classes will call it just hypotenuse leg. I added this little R here to remind us that we need to show that there are right angles there. And so that's your 3rd match of hypotenuse leg. So if 2 right triangles, so show the right angles are there, have their hypotenuses, and then 1 pair of corresponding legs congruent, then the triangles are congruent. So triangle NOH is congruent to triangle AOH by RHL. Note here in blue, segment OH is congruent to segment OH, the H flew away, by reflexive property, and that just means any segment or angle is congruent to itself. So you can use that. If you notice, you have 2 triangles that are sharing an angle or sharing a side, you can automatically say, ooh, that side is congruent because those 2 triangles have that same side. Or, ooh, that angle is congruent to itself. It's a reflexive property because both of those triangles are sharing that angle. All right? So now we're going to do some practice in just identifying these, and then there's a second video doing some algebra with these shortcuts. All right, so let's get to that. So coming back here, now I actually linked the problems that we're going over right now today as a PDF. So if you have a printer at home and wanted to print them out, that's fine, or you could just pause the video, and when we get to a problem like this one, you can draw the diagram and then just practice first before I go over it with you. So remember, pause the video, try it, and then see what comes up next. All right, that's how I would use this video. So congruent triangle shortcuts practice. So the next 5 problems we're going to look at, mark the diagram. Super important, always mark the diagram with what you're given. Look for reflexive pieces and vertical angles. Yes, super important. So those are not givens, but something that you notice. And then decide if you have enough information. So we always need 3 matches. And then those 3 matches have to match up with one of these 5, right? Side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side, and RHL. And if it doesn't match one of those 5, then you also say, can't determine it, I have no idea. All right. So if you look at the first one, I have 2 sets of corresponding sides congruent, and then I'm going to look at my givens here. So segment HI is perpendicular to segment EI, so there's a right angle there. And then segment FE is perpendicular to segment EI, so there's a right angle there. And notice I have a side, an angle between, and a side. So these 2 triangles are congruent by side, angle, side. And then I'm going to make sure I'm writing this in the right order. Triangle EFG, and then triangle IGH. Okay? Something to note, just because there's a right angle doesn't mean it's RHL automatically. So if the hypotenuses are not congruent, you can't use it when you have the right angle. Okay? So look at the next example. Here on the right. So we're given that these are right angles. Awesome. These opposite sides are congruent. Awesome. So I was not given anything else. So I'm going to look for reflexive pieces and vertical angles. And I hope you see it, but I'm going to highlight it right here. Do you notice that? Those 2 triangles actually share this side. So BD is congruent to BD by reflexive property. Okay, just kind of training our eyes to see that. So triangle ABD. Triangle ABD matches with triangle CDB. Now let's look at this. Is this side angle side? No, because the angle's not between the 2 sides. But I do have a right angle. I do have the hypotenuse here, segment BD, and then one of the legs. So this is RHL. So I hope that you can see, if you look at these long enough, see the difference between right triangles and then whether or not it's side angle side or side angle side or right angle hypotenuse leg. Right? We'll look at the next one here. 2 sets of sides congruent, and then the angle outside of them. So I have side angle side, but I need to have the angle in between. And so even though I have 3 matches here, this is one that cannot be determined because the angle is not between the 2 sides. So I don't have any postulates that fit that. All right, so then there's nothing else to write. Okay, so I have 2 sets of sides here for the last one on this page. S and P trisect segment Q, so squiggle, squiggle, squiggle. Ooh, and now I see both sets of triangles have 3 sets of corresponding sides, congruent, so side, side, side. So triangle TVS is congruent to triangle QRP by side, side, side. All right, and then remember, feel free to replay parts or pause. All right, so just a quick review. You can also skip through this if you feel like I understand these 5. But we're just going to run through what do these look like one more time. So if you want to show 3 pairs of corresponding sides congruent, you'd have a diagram that looks like that. Side, side, side. 2 pairs of corresponding sides are congruent. Let's pick these 2. And the included angle, ooh, okay, side angle side. Show that 2 pairs of corresponding angles are congruent, so we'll pick some. So let's say that. And then the included side. So there's the included side, or the side in between them. So it looks like we have angle, side, angle in that picture. Show each triangle has a right angle, plus the hypotenuses, all right. And 1 pair of corresponding legs. So this one is RHL. Remember, this one is not side angle side with the right angle because this right angle is not between the 2 sides. It looks like we got one more. Given triangle ABD, or triangle, sorry, angle ABD is congruent to angle CDB, and then angle A, and I don't know if it's a right angle, so I'm going to mark it like this, is congruent to angle C. All right, I have the 2 matches, and then we're going to check to see if there's anything else. And I see this side, right? Our reflexive property. BD congruent to BD by reflexive property again. Okay, so triangle ABD is congruent to triangle ABDC, triangle CDB by, and well, let me draw one of the triangles out so we can see it a little bit better. But I marked this angle, and that, so it's angle, angle, side. All right, that's it for just identifying whether or not triangles are congruent by the 5 shortcuts, one of the 5 shortcuts. The next video will be some applying it with some algebra. And hopefully this first part of the video will be helpful for the first question on your assignment today. All right, see you in video 2.